I know failure well. I glimpsed it lurking at the ragged edges of your mind. I watched its venom spread through the veins of the world, and I trembled at its terrible reverberations.
I enjoyed discovering new abilities for my characters in Darkest Dungeon 2 by visiting the Shrine of Reflection. At first, each character only comes equipped with 5 basic skills, but by completing 5 chapters of their personal story, you can unlock an additional 6 skills. These chapters offer a deep dive into the history of each hero, and completing them allows you to unlock a new skill connected to the chapter's events.
By sour winds can blaze radiant once again. The time has come to face your failures, or be consumed by them.
The sequel to Darkest Dungeon, Darkest Dungeon 2, takes you on a new adventure where an even greater evil lies waiting below the corruption you once conquered at the estate. Madness has taken hold of everything, and your task is to guide your brave group of heroes to the mountain to prevent a catastrophic event. But before reaching the mountain, you must complete a set number of regions based on the confession you've selected. These regions offer opportunities to battle lair bosses, gain new hero skills, or meet a tragic end. I was impressed with how well the story was continued. It showed how the evil had spread to the surrounding regions, painting a vivid picture of the apocalyptic world. The game didn't hold back, which made my successes and failures more impactful. However, moments of hope also contrasted with the overall dark tone and made me remember that not all is lost, even in the darkest moments. Darkest Dungeon 2 maintains the same grimdark atmosphere as the original. Honestly, it's a genuinely good idea to avoid playing this game during the day because of how dark it actually is. Avoiding daylight not only prevents glare on the screen but is also a simple way to upgrade immersion. In more ways than one, this is not a game meant to be played in the light of day. Otherwise, Darkest Dungeon 2 is a serious graphical upgrade from the original. The characters have much more detail and the actions are much more cinematic. This visual flair adds drama to intense moments, such as when a character has a meltdown in the middle of a chaotic battle. Which is something that can happen to the characters in the game, not just to the player after several tough losses. If a character gains too much stress, their resolve is tested. A character may have a meltdown, which can have negative effects on the rest of the party, or they may remain resolute, instead inspiring their comrades. The risk inherent in this means that managing stress is just as important as managing hit points. One major change from the original Darkest Dungeon is that the party is no longer viewed from the same side perspective as the combat encounters. Traveling from location to location now takes place in a 3D environment as the party rides in a stagecoach. While the characters will still exchange dialogue back and forth or comment on their situation, it doesn't always build the same bond between player and party as the original game. But maybe that's for the best, because a deeper bond only makes the inevitable deaths that much harder to handle. There are 2 main questions that need to be answered before we can come to a conclusion about Darkest Dungeon 2. The answer to the first one is relatively straightforward. Without further ado, is Darkest Dungeon 2 a good quality game? Yes, without a doubt. Having already completed about 25 hours of gameplay, I can assure you that both the gameplay and the technical aspects are up to par with the reputation and success of the first game. The battles and the general gameplay loop remain absolutely addictive, the returning elements maintain the same high level of quality and the new features have been seamlessly integrated into the whole. I also find it very positive that each campaign, regardless of whether it was completed successfully or unsuccessfully, contributes to making the next one slightly more accessible through the candles of hope you receive as rewards for completing objectives, which you spend between campaigns on persistent unlocks and bonuses. The second question, however, is a really spicy one. Is Darkest Dungeon 2 a worthy sequel to the first game? I really don't know, it depends through which prism one wants to look at it. In terms of overall quality, fun gameplay, quality technical aspects, of course. But the truth is that the basic campaign structure is so different from the first game that anyone who buys Darkest Dungeon 2 looking only for an improved version of the game they loved is bound to be shocked by the scope of the changes. My personal opinion is that if the developers wanted to make something different, then that's perfectly fine. However, I think they should have called it something else and not Darkest Dungeon 2. After all, there is the similar example of Firaxis, who wanted to experiment with XCOM and named their spin-off game XCOM, Chimera Squad, rather than XCOM 3. Red Hook Studios could have chosen a name along the lines of Road Trip, A Darkest Dungeon Story, or Darkest Dungeon, Conquer the Mountain, and avoided much of the backlash. It's a perfectly fair criticism to call Darkest Dungeon 2 unfair and impenetrable. Despite its unusual and complicated systems, it does little to help new players, and it feels like ages before you get hold of any decent weapons or equipment. It's not the most accessible of indie games, but it certainly is one of the most cleverly constructed, and once you finally understand how it all works, it's hugely satisfying to defy the odds and try to find redemption for your characters. You probably won't, you'll most likely just get them all killed again, but somehow you're still compelled to keep trying.